Hey everybody, welcome back to part 2 in this Shovelhead post-service rebuild and inspection video. In our last video, we emptied the oil, as well as the filter, cleaned out the oil pan to remove all the sludge, checked the magnetic plug, emptied the transmission, inspected the transmission oil for anything metallic, refilled the transmission with fresh 80W90, fit a better seal to the oil pan for a test, opened the primary to make an adjustment to the belt, as well as an inspection of the clutch, completely remounted both exhaust pipes, removed and cleaned the tappet screen, conducted a quick cleaning and inspection of the carburetor, installed my new Andrews push rods that I had mentioned from a previous video, replaced the battery as it was getting weak from the failed charging system, replaced the spark plugs gap to 40, flushed out the fuel tank, repurposed that fuel for my tractor, flushed all the old oil from the system, installed a new oil filter, and lubricated the inner portion of the chain, waiting afterwards for parts to arrive. And my house is by no means finished, but we find just enough space in this garage to complete this project. A shipment of parts has arrived and we'll jump right back into the project. A small envelope contains some of the smaller parts that I'll be working with the documentation. These exhaust O-rings were mentioned in the previous video. If my seal doesn't hold, I'll be using these in the future. I believe my front brake leak is just this gasket. It'll be replaced in this video. But my first order of business will be this magnetic drain plug for my transmission that I managed to find. There'll be some challenges since I just filled this with transmission fluid, and I'm going to handle this in the worst possible way. So I wanted to share the recording that I took as I attempted to change out this plug. You would think I would just put a clean container under the plug, drain all the fluid, swap out the plug, and pour the fluid back in, but no, I'm going to do something dumb. I'm going to pull the plug and then quickly cover it with my finger. Attempt to swap the crush washer by removing it from the old plug, which I realize does not come off easy because it is now compressed a little bit. So I have to use the two fingers available, currently holding the hole shut on the bottom of the transmission, hoping that I could free it because my hand cannot reach the crush washers, but I managed to free it. I got lucky. More importantly, I cannot get the crush washer onto the new one because the threads are bigger. So now I have to put the old plug in, and you can see oil spilling. And I lost however many ounces of oil trying to get the old plug in so I could step away from the motorcycle. We could already see this is a mess. And I do have like a towel under there. It's not that bad, but it's still terrible. And now I'm thinking, now that I have the crush washer on, I can swap out the plugs, not realizing that after all these years, it's going to be hard to start the threads because I got the old one that was sitting there and I got the new one with slightly larger threads. It's never going to happen. I'm going to end up just dumping all the oil all over myself, trying to get this done, getting frustrated. Don't do it this way. That's why I kept this in the video, to see how not to ever do this. I realize most people would be too embarrassed to post this, but I don't give a shit. This is what happened. We live, we learn. Once I did drain the entire transmission, I was able to fit the new plug on correctly. All it cost me was a tranny full of oil and about a half an hour of cleanup. After that, the transmission was filled up just like it was in the previous video. I stopped here in the first video when I found a replacement chain guard. Couldn't find one for years on JP Cycle, and I did find one on Dennis Kirk. In fairness, I went back to JP Cycle. They also now have them in stock. This one, put back from the build a couple years ago, is all nasty, scratched up. It's chipped. Right over here, it's coming off, and it's missing parts too on the lower bracket. Celebrity wife joins us to remove a bolt. Go ahead, keep going. I think you can remove the ratchet now, turn it by your fingers.
Is something gonna fall off?
No, nothing would fall. Good job. I'll remove the bolt up front now, and it's got washers on both sides because the rubber grommet in the middle has been gone for I don't know how many years. We heard the washers all fall out onto the jack. I'll turn my tire into position now and install my tool that I use to make sure that the tire is aligned properly with the chain. I've used this before in the build video. I bring it parallel and have a look down back, which is hard to do on camera, but I'll tell you right now that it is perfectly straight going down the chain, so we have nothing to change here. Another test I like to do is I will spin the wheel several times fast, and once I've spun it, I will stop it and have a look at where the sprocket sits on the chain, and we can see it's centered, not leaning to the left or right. With those checks out of the way, I'll apply chain lubricant now to the outside of the chain. A quick comparison of the old versus new chain guard still in the wrapper. Looks really nice, and you can see the rubber grommet in the new one missing from the old. So now I'll carefully install the new chain guard. Running in that screw up front by hand first. I don't need those washers anymore now that I have the correct rubber grommet in there. And now I'll put in that screw in the back. Now it's supported. I'll torque everything down. And that's it for the chain and chain guard portion of this project. I had some time to put the battery cover back on. And now I'll be lowering the jack slightly for the next task. First, I'm going to jack up the back of the bike to take any pressure off the rear suspension. That's sufficient. I cobbled together this seat post repair about 13 years ago and never got around to finally fixing it, and now I'm going to do so. A 9/16 will remove this outer nut. Spray a little bit of loosener just to make this easier. The vice grip is being used because with the bracket in the way, the nut is pushed so far out, there's no way to get another wrench in there. But as I hold it in position and spin from the outside, it's slowly working its way out. Now I remove that nut, as well as the old bracket. And the nut goes right back on. We tighten it right back down now. I'll tell you quite honestly, I don't know if the bracket was in the right position and the seat is wrong from back in the day, but either way, I have a new system that we're going to put in place, so these brackets are going to go anyway. Drop in the washer, the cover, associated hardware, and we'll tighten it back down. Now we'll do the same thing on the other side. I'll note that there were no surprises on the other side. Everything was exactly the same, so I'm just going to skim right through this and we'll continue where we have both brackets removed and everything buttoned up in the rear. And here we have Drag Specialties seat mount kit, 58 to 84 FX. We'll unbox this now, and we see this main bracket, some of the screws that were packaged loosely in there. 2 springs were also provided, and a nut laying in the corner of the box. The back portion of the bracket will fit nicely through the frame. I'll start by removing the seat and the old bracket. I have to remove the seat first to get at that bolt that holds the front of the seat onto the bracket. Now the rest of the old bracket hardware can be removed. These pieces will now go in as a test fit and then ultimately tighten down. I'll place these spacers into the frame first. They fit very nice. Then I'll lay the bracket over and then slide the rod through. I'll keep these loose till I measure the seat distance, and then I'll take this out, tighten everything down, and put it back. This is the front bracket. It secures itself over here and grabs onto the frame. I've measured and tightened down the spring mounts and reinstalled the bracket. So now we'll install the front bracket with the provided hardware, and I'm going to try really hard not to drop the small nut into the engine. Fantastic. Never hit the floor. So I grabbed the remaining nut in hopes that I don't drop this one too, now being a bit more cautious, and I'll tighten this one down, just enough to hold it in place. I found the other one in back of the battery tray. So this is connected. It needs to either be bent or some sort of rubber dampener put in here. Installing my seat bracket on now. And this is where things get just a little bit iffy, because I don't know if the bracket's long enough or that angle on the back of the seat is a little too much. It's not a perfect fit, but it's good enough for now. I may end up just getting another seat for this bike because I want another seat anyway. But if we look as I install the seat, and I've already measured this up, we'll see as I lay this in permanently and lock these two bolts down, that while it sits on there, the two studs on this seat point out on an angle, not pointing downward, and it causes a little bit of stress on that spring. I sat on it and it feels a lot better, but we're going to revisit that in the future. Good enough for now. So this gasket had separated, and what happened was as air was blown by, it was wicking out the brake fluid from here. We could see it sort of emptied out, and I filled it up and cleaned up the top here, and I did get that new gasket, H5769, and I'm just going to swap this out because I don't see any of the problem with these front brakes at this time. I think it's just a defective gasket and nothing more. With that, we could get this bike off the lift and give it a wash. The bike wasn't actually dirty, it was just covered from a thick layer of dust from construction, so washing it off with the hose and then blow drying it to remove all the water drops got it perfectly clean. Now it's time to remove this tank bib, apron, cover, whatever. And these things piss me off because they're garbage. There's nothing wrong with the metal per se, but this plastic just disconnects or delaminates and you can't reconnect it. It's terrible. I have an exact replacement of my replacement from Specialties, which is probably the same replacement as my replacement was. I'll start by removing these two screws first. These are 5/32, and I used the multi-tool just to size it up. And I just continued making it looser because I'm too lazy to grab the socket right now. The one in the back is 3/16. Once these are loosened up, I'll grab the actual socket and continue. Then I'll straighten out the bars and feed up the speedometer cable to help push up the cluster. And that provides enough room to unscrew the speedometer cable. I have a bent wire holding the tachometer cable in. I remove that now. I just straighten it out with a pair of pliers. The tachometer cable could be pulled right out. Finally, I have the electrical plug. I squeeze the connector and dislodge the plug from the receptacle. With that, the cluster is removed. I have to remove this hex bolt over here. There's a nut securing it on the other side. The hex bolt is 1/4. The other side is 1/2 inch. Take off the nut and the lock washer, as well as the flat washer. And I pull the bolt. On this side, mine uses a large slotted screwdriver, so I just remove that screw now. And remove the old part from the bike. I'm going to save this old piece to see if there's an effective way to make repairs on this, so I don't keep buying new ones. This black rubber hasn't split. See if there's a good glue that I could use, something. There's an opportunity to clean up those areas of the tank with some mist and shine, so I'm just going to hit this right quick. Here's the new piece, and the rubber is in there tight, and if you look closely, you can see that it is in fact glued to the metal. So I'll lay the new piece in now. We can see that it has to flex to go around the holes on the tank, and then I'll secure it with the bolt, pushing it through both sides. Then I'll put all of the hardware back on the other side, lock down the nut, followed by the screw on the rear. There's some give here, so I want to make sure everything's centered before I tighten it down. After that, I'll secure the bolt in the front. And with that, this portion of the assembly is complete. We'll just put the cluster right back on. I took a few minutes to inspect the bottom of this and clean up the bottom of the seal. Reconnecting the electrical connector first. I'll pull the odometer reset cable through, and then the other side reconnecting it to the odometer. And I'll put my little pin through that hole that I'll have to line up first. Then I'll bend it to secure it. Finally reconnecting the speedometer cable, making sure it seats properly, screwing it all the way in and snugging it down. I'll then make sure this rubber seal stays in position properly as I pull down on the speedometer cable, constantly inspecting that rubber seal until the cluster is in the correct position. I'll then line up and put in all 3 screws, not tightening them down yet. I just want to get them in so they're lined up. And then once I get all 3 of them in, I'll come around to all of them and snug them down. And that completes this whole portion of the project. It's time for a test drive. I do a check for strange noises as it warms up, and just to make sure, as it's been sitting a while, yeah, there was no oil coming out the breather, so that was good. Everything seems okay, tired, aired up. I'll go for a ride and report back. We're back and check for noise, no noise, and I kind of make a mistake here because I cut the gas and I was going to let the bike die doing this, and I should have just killed it right here and just drained the bowl, because what I wanted to do here is pull the plugs, and I was going to do a compression test, but it sat there for several minutes dying, making the plugs all sooty as it slowly died. So a plug inspection was going to be worthless. I wasn't really on the highway to get any effective plug reading, and sitting there didn't help at all. So all we're going to see is black soot on the plugs. Front cylinder will be first for compression test. I've got the throttle full open right now with the throttle lock on. I protect my ignition with the spark testers here grounded off to the heads. I'll just zoom in and flip this over so we can have a better look. And we're looking at 158 PSI for the front. I'll break it down and set up the test in the rear cylinder now. Release the pressure. We'll turn it around, have a look, and we're looking at 165 with a difference of only 4.4%. These numbers are very good. I'm very happy. And that concludes the compression testing portion of this project. So I'm going to disconnect everything, put the plugs back in, and normal everything up. As the engine's really hot, I'm going to wait for it to come back down to temperature before I put the plugs in though. Definitely don't forget to release that throttle lock. So the seat, better, not perfect, seems a little high. I may try some smaller springs and see if that helps. We can see those springs are ridiculously high for the new setup. Engine sounds good. I'm glad the new push rods are finally in. That small belt adjustment made a big difference on shifting. I can't emphasize that enough. Straightening out the settings on the clutch helped too, but that belt adjustment was something. Yeah, that's it. I think everything was covered in this tune-up and inspection. Bike's ready to roll. I'll point out there were no leaks on the master cylinder after the rebuild. It was simply a bad gasket. There were no leaks here as I went through every single section after the ride. It's absolutely fine. After the season, we're looking at rebuilding the front shocks and suspension. Most likely complete disassembly with new neck bearings and everything. So it's going to be a nice project. Still keeping a close eye on that oil pump to see if that check valve is going to need more work. I don't know. That I saw oil on the floor may have been from the work that I did or some leaking from the check valve. Time will tell. We'll come back to it. And that concludes part 2 in this 2-part series of the post-rebuild tune-up and inspection. I hope you found this video enjoyable, entertaining, and informative. Do me a favor, hit that like button down below. Helps me out a lot when you do. And hit that subscribe button for more videos like this when they come out. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?